A quick word before we jump in. This will be our final episode of the year, and what a year it has been. A tough year in a lot of respects, but for the Mockingcast at least, it's been a year of enormous growth. Our listenership has more than doubled, and I can speak for my fellow co-hosts when I say that we're frankly a little overwhelmed by the response and the encouragement that we receive on a frequent basis from people all around the world. We're so happy to see, with all that's going on, that this program is a source of nourishment and hope in a time that's very uncertain and wild. This is the time of year when we look to raise our budget, and so I wanted to ask you to give to support Mockingbird. There's a lot that goes into not only this podcast, but the many other things we do. Our print magazine, our hyperactive website, our app, our conferences, you name it. We could really use the help. So if you're in a position to offer that help, please do so. There will be a link in the show notes to where you can do that. You know, it's really helpful to become a monthly donor. That helps us plan for the next year. But any sort of gift would be greatly welcomed. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a happy Advent and a very Merry Christmas. Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries. I'm David Zoll, your host, and in a few moments, I'll be joined by my co-hosts, Sarah Condon and RJ Heyman. We come to you every other week to discuss a few of the places where we currently see grace and its absence playing out in unexpected and compelling ways. We're glad to have you with us.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
December. I can't believe it is finally here, or I wish it wasn't, or I'm glad it is. I don't know. I feel like we're hurtling through time and space.
It's just weird.
Very quickly.
It's just weird. Yeah.
Is it really still 2021? What is it going to be 2022? What's happening? How are you guys? How was your Thanksgiving?
Let's see. I've gotten through Thanksgiving. Thank God. My aunt came up to me at the end of the afternoon and just squeezed my arm and was like, "We made it through," which was so sweet.
Really?
Yeah. And then Neil turns 11 in a few days, and then there's the anniversary of my parents' death on the 9th, and then on the 11th my brother gets married. So I've been calling around hospitals to see if they'll just preemptively hook you up to an IV that you can walk around with. But they won't. I don't know what I'd put in the bag, honestly.
You can take
There'd
Christmas
be a high
shopping
demand
with you.
this time of year, I think, not just in Houston.
A catheter even? No one will give me anything. So, yeah. RJ, how are you this time of year?
Yeah.
Happy Advent, guys.
Oh my gosh, happy Advent.
Advent.
Advent begins in the dark, and that's where you began.
Oh my
so
God, it's
good.
So true.
That's where this episode began.
I had a great Thanksgiving. I mean, it was just so nice to have all my boys together, have Jackson home from college, who Jackson is very loud, but I miss his loud energy. He's very large, very loud and very large. He takes up a lot of space in our home when he's home, and I love it. And Marshall is so happy to have him home, and we played, watched a lot of football, ate a lot of food, played a lot of Settlers of Catan and Pictionary, and we all went out. All five of us went out golfing together, which is such a Florida thing to do. And Jamie brought Marshall along. She's like, "Oh, we'll just do 3-4 holes," and then we brought 2 cars. We're like, "We'll go home." He melted down on the second hole.
Oh my gosh!
But then made it through 18. And wanted to play more. Marshall just hacking around. Jamie got her steps in. That was her whole thing. But my favorite part of the entire afternoon was when she turned to me on the 11th or 12th hole. She goes, "Are you guys always this bad?"
Bad at golf, you mean, or just bad in general?
Bad at golf. And I was like, "Yep, we're always this bad." She's like, "That's awesome." She's like, "I feel like I could play with you." I was like, "You could definitely play with us because we're terrible.
I love that.
Terrible."
Yeah, you can find whole new things that you can suck at. That's what hobbies are. Right?
That's what hobbies should be. I'm very thankful for that.
That's what hobbies should be. Things that you're really not very good at.
So it was really fun.
We had a really nice time. We were in Washington D.C. and did a lot of bike riding, and we played some Settlers of Catan ourselves.
Ooh.
Catan Junior.
Oh,
let me
of course.
make that
Yeah,
clear.
yeah.
What color are you,
watched-
Dave? Are you always the same color when you play? Do you have a preferred color? Or?
I went orange because I'm a Protestant. But
I
that's
go
the-
orange too because I'm Dutch. Yes, orange all the way, baby. Yes.
Plus UVA. It's just you can't do the Mets. I can't get away from orange in my
Meet
life.
the Mets. Meet
I don't think
the
I have
Mets.
a single orange piece of clothing, but maybe I should. Maybe I'm overcompensating. I did spend quite a few hours hanging out with the Beatles
Oh, sure.
on Disney
Yeah.
Plus.
I haven't watched any of that. Don't spoil. I mean, are there spoilers?
I mean, kind of a mammoth. The whole thing is a spoiler in the sense that, well, first of all, it does feel like hanging out with them because it's tedious and it's a bit boring, and there's a lot. They're waiting for John to show up, or George leaves for a second, and it's there's not a lot happening for a lot of it. But then they play music and it's joyful, and a lot of the stories that you've been told about the Beatles breaking up, it turns out, are only partially true, just like every story in life. And this, no doubt, this has its own, point of view. But it's one of these things, I always think about as like, we don't know the end of the story, or we do know the end of the story as Christians, but when we look at our individual lives and we think everything's gone down the tubes, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. We don't actually know the end of the story, and in that sense, and we interpret too quickly. And I think that we see that with the Beatles. Like they were kind of having fun. They knew exactly what was going on, that the project had sort of run its course, but they still loved each other. I mean, there would be acrimony and money and sort of rights and stuff like that. But for the large part, it was just for a music nerd, obsessive, shall we say, like me, it was a kind of a Christmas gift, an early Christmas gift. So
That's
awesome.
great.
Get Back. It's not for everyone. A lot of people will be like, whoa, this is boring. But then, there's flashes. It's like life. It's very boring with flashes of extreme beauty and also acrimony. This one thing we also watched as I watched with my boys was 8-Bit Christmas, this new movie. It's on HBO Max. It's like a Christmas story, but about the 80s, about kids who were dying to get a Nintendo.
Nice.
And all the things they're willing to do to get a Nintendo. And it's delightful.
It sounds
I'll
like
say that.
it.
It's
Stranger
you guys would-
Things for Christmas.
It's got a little bit of that vibe mixed with sort of a Christmas story.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
You'll get all the references, but one of the things that you see in that movie is they go Christmas shopping for all their shopping. One day they go to the mall. They're like outside Chicago.
Gosh.
And it's a mall that is jam-packed with people, the way
Yeah.
malls used to be on Christmas, and there's a food court, and we're going
I
to go
totally
here first and then
forgot
there.
about this. Yes.
Yeah, and it got me thinking about malls, partially because I also ended up going into there's one mall still standing here, and I went there for a shoe store, and it was just like exactly what you'd think. It was a mausoleum.
Yeah.
It was. No one was there.
Except people getting their steps in. Just people walking around in a temperature-controlled environment.
so Jamie goes to
Literally,
the mall,
the
so you're
only
telling us.
pairs
Okay, got it.
pairs of old ladies walking around.
That's true.
Yeah.
But it's also like 2/3 of the stores are closed,
Yeah.
if not 5/6
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
But that was what's going through my mind when I read this first piece we're going to talk about called Mallstalgia, Mallstalgia by Jason Tebbe
That just flows off the tongue.
on Tropics of Meta. This is what he says. He says, I'm not the only person feeling mallstalgia these days. Taylor Swift's longing Coney Island song featuring sad dad rockers The National from her Evermore album has the lines, "'Cause we were like the mall before the internet. It was the one place to be. The mischief, the gift-wrapped suburban dreams." Mallstalgia. If the internet killed the mall, it's ironic that there's a whole online industry documenting dead and abandoned shopping malls. This mallstalgia can perhaps be chalked up to the fact that the generations most shaped by mall culture have hit middle age and are thinking about their own mortality. But I think there's something deeper going on here, he writes. Our idea of what the mall represents has been radically softened. Malls used to be a stand-in for the shallow culture of consumerism. Hence, alternative indie rock artists of the day like Mojo Nixon writing songs like "Burn Down the Malls." Little did we know then that much worse was coming down the line. While the mall was meant merely to be a centralized location for money to be blown on consumerist float sim, young people repurposed it to their own ends. We had to because there was literally nowhere else in public to go, especially in small towns. However, we soon learned it was much more efficient to have the shopping without the added cost of social space. And so now the packages come right to our doors. No more sales clerks to chat with at the register, just invisible warehouse workers and delivery drivers being pushed to their absolute limits. When Gen Xers like me talk about the mall, maybe we sound like the old-timers we used to roll our eyes at. So to temper my complaints, I will say that beer, cars, television, coffee, and food in general are all far better than they were in my youth. But we have continued to lose a sense of public space, of shared community, and the mall oddly helped preserve it. He finishes by saying, in adulthood, I moved to New Jersey, perhaps the cradle of mall culture, and a place where some malls still limp on. Appropriately, the abandoned Sears at the local mall serves as a COVID vaccination site. We find ourselves in a strange time when capitalism no longer needs the mall, but we still do. Did you guys spend time in malls?
Oh my gosh. Did
Sarah?
I spend time in malls? Yes. I mean, some of my favorite memories. Well, I have so many beautiful memories at Christmas of all of the cousins I always talk about on the podcast. Like, they would all come in from, the Delta, and we would make these huge, hauls, and we would go see Santa Claus, and we would go to a movie, and our dads would be in charge, which was always wild, I mean, and I have memories of being a teenager and making a long list. And it was this store and then this store and then this store. And it was the first place you really had a sense of independence, I think, It's funny. We took our kids this summer to Dollywood we did Dollywood and then we did the water park. And I realized the first time that our oldest has had that chance to walk around by himself that I would have had in the mall, so so I will say we are one of the few places, and I was listening to a piece about this recently, that still has a very healthy mall. We have a couple of healthy malls in Houston, but we have Memorial City Mall near us, and part of what is keeping malls alive is they're putting in higher end stores, and so which is weird to me too, right? Because if I'm gonna go to the mall, I need to go to Claire's, and get questionably cheap earrings. But
Spencer's.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, Spencer's.
Spencer's
so
Gifts.
long.
It still exists. It's one of the 5 stores that's open at our local
we
mall.
did a Mockingbird pilgrimage.
Lots of lava lamps.
Yeah, but so we still have it's weird. I don't really shop there, but we still have the experience, and our kids love it, of walking through a Hop-In mall.
Wow.
And it's I'm going tomorrow actually, because we're going to the American Girl doll store at our mall, and I'm super pumped. And it's fun. I don't know. It's thank you for this story, Dave, because I'm kind of in a sad place. I definitely
Get thee to a mall.
I
feeling
pulled out my mom's Christmas decorations earlier, held them and cried, and I've been kind of excited about tomorrow, but not able to understand why. And I'm it's this beautiful piece of comfort and nostalgia to me. So thank
Gotta go to the
you.
Galleria. Hit the Galleria, Sarah.
I know, the Galleria is we have great malls in Houston,
Yeah, go ice skating.
But Jackson, Mississippi, honey, you're getting your COVID shot at the mall. You know what I mean? I know what you're talking about, Dave. Yes, I'm familiar.
What about you, Arj?
A little bit, yeah. I had a weird experience growing up because I was, in middle school. I was in boarding school in New York, and we didn't really do malls there. And then I went to 3 different high schools, but a little bit. There was the West Farms Mall in I remember that distinctly, in West Hartford, Farmington, Connecticut area, and would go with my family every so often. And I know I talked about my mom last week, but I remember enjoying this. It's going to sound terrible. I liked shopping with my mom because she was just
I love that.
because she was good to us, and with my dad, it was We're killing something. It needs to be as cheap as possible.
Yeah.
Let's be as quick as we possibly can. Let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
You know, but my mom was like, "Are you sure you like it? Do you like it? You're the one who has to wear it. Do we need to go to another store? I'm happy to go as many stores as you want to go to find the clothes that you feel comfortable wearing." You know, and so I do remember having fun shopping with my mom and just feeling like important. You know, and you know that back when I cared what I looked like and was trying to impress the ladies at in high school, it was nice. So yes, I do have some fond memories of the mall.
I don't think I remember my dad going to the mall with us once.
I literally can't picture your dad in a mall.
Yeah, peasy.
There was a movie store. No, that's not true. There was a movie store at one of the malls near us in, I think, South Carolina, and he would go just there. You know how he would know the quickest possible way to get there and the quickest possible way to get out.
And exactly where to park to
It was basically his idea of hell. But I have great memories of going to the Gap with my mom.
Yes.
I remember going to Sam Goody and going to the food court, and that was when Chick-fil-A really wasn't everywhere. So there was a mall of Chick-fil-A when I was a kid.
And you're like, are we going to the Chick-fil-A mall? You know, it's like.
But I remember there being like, volunteer fashion shows like that kids would be part of, or like choir recitals, and sometimes like.
Have you guys been watching Physical? Have you watched Physical on Apple Plus?
No.
That totally takes place in a mall. There's like a what's it called? Aerobics, studio in a mall. Yeah.
I mean, the mall was this place, and it just really does not exist anymore.
They're outdoor shopping plazas, right? There are like,
but it's like the mall.
Not in the same way.
The mall was this place where everything was possible, and even if it was raining outside, I mean, I hate those outdoor places because like there's something about like you're all in a building together. Your show choir might perform. Would you like a piece of Sbarro pizza? Do you need a homecoming dress? Like all of this, right, could happen in this same space. This is why, and I know all the reasons why we've got to stop being so consumeristic and we have to stop buying things and we're going to kill the planet, but isn't that already happening? But anyway, I love consumerism. Like, it was a huge part of my childhood, and it's super comforting to me now. And, like, everybody else can recycle. I don't know, Like
retail therapy, baby.
I love it.
Well, gosh, I remember KB Toy Stores?
Oh,
whoa,
yes.
That was a big,
Sharper
that was a big
image.
deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
go and sit in the massage chair.
Yes. That were
So
like,
what we're saying
had
is
the money to buy those?
Exactly, the $3,000 massage chair. Yeah.
What we're talking about, though, is all three of us have very positive memories associated with the mall.
Yeah, we do.
And even if it's not like the overwhelming, memory of our youth, it is. There is something about this is sort of another piece that's lamenting the lack of connection.
For
and
so much neon.
The
big hair.
the atomization of our culture, and it's got to be another sort of endorsement for church life, I think, on some level. But
more shopping at church, more gift shops.
I don't know if that's the option, but I think it's like just a place to go and see people.
It's a place to go and see people, for sure.
It's a place to go and see people. And how many people's, like, what Taylor Swift always talks about, she's sort of conjuring up, is like, it was a place where you would go and see girls. Like, that's what I remember.
Oh,
it's like that's where
sure.
you knew that the girls in your class were hanging out there. Before there were parties, before there were any other ways to sort of interact without parents around. It was you'd sort of travel in little packs and maybe
I mean, I still
say
remember
one thing and run away.
Like, I still remember like the TLC album Crazy Sexy Cool had come out, and my cousin Anna from the Delta, so like big deal, she would come into town, we'd make a list, first stop Applebee's, that kind of thing. And I still remember that there was this like plaid shiny crop top that I would wear with like exposed midriff. I don't know how I got out of the house.
Sarah.
And overalls over it with like one down.
Such a good look. Such a good look.
Yeah, okay.
What
So
was
Debbie
I
Gibson.
wearing? And like
So
I
Debbie
would roll
Gibson.
in there like, she is here. Like just like, oh my God.
Well, talking about shopping, we're going to move to another piece that's written for our website for Mockingbird by Sarah Hinlicky Wilson. Sarah is a ELCA pastor in Tokyo, I believe, in Japan. And she writes this. The title of the and she always has very pithy titles. The title of her post is "I Hate Presents." And she said this. She says, I used to love the giving of presents just as much as the receiving. And parents of little children probably love Christmas even more than the children do, for the sheer gift of being able to give, and for beholding afresh the pleasure of receiving without jaded eyes. But somehow, over the years, the joy in both giving and receiving has all drained away. There isn't much love for presents left in me. I think I was the one who spoiled it first. One year, I found the perfect Christmas gift for a friend. This was when I was well into my 20s. I was so incredibly pleased at finding something so perfect that, frankly, I lorded it over her. I spent all of December telling her how much she was going to love it. She probably would have if I hadn't persecuted her with such pressure to be amazed. It didn't go well when she gave it to her. And that was my introduction to how the demand for gratitude becomes its own tool of abuse. I have counted hours and days and weeks for an acknowledgement of a gift that I thought was a showstopper. I have self-righteously sided with Jesus in indignation at the 9 lepers who never got around to thanking him, without noticing that Jesus didn't revoke the cure or chase the lepers down or even remind them to say thank you. He just let them go. And of course, at the same time, I've failed to say thank yous of my own and resented the burden of gratitude placed on me by others. Because if you're going to be self-righteous, you may as well be a hypocrite too. I've come to the conclusion that the problem with presents is that they're no longer free and no longer gifts. Presents have become, for me, a law, and nothing wrecks a gift faster than making a law out of it. So I ran a little experiment recently to see if it was even possible anymore to recapture the magic. I sent a gift, for no particular reason or occasion, to someone who was not expecting it. I won't presume to say whether it succeeded from the recipient's point of view, but at least on my end, sending that present gave me joy for the first time in ages. I gave the gift because I wanted to, not because I had to. It turns out that freedom is essential to a gift being a gift. Then she shifts into preacher mode. She says, God's gift of Christ really is a free gift, unasked for and unlooked for. Which means that if we aren't continually preaching the gospel as a surprise, a truly new thing every time it's extended to a sinner and not a trap or a contract or a new law, then we haven't preached the thing rightly at all. Truth be told, I don't really hate presents, not when they're actual presents. Just to be free of all those laws would be the nicest Christmas present I could imagine.
That's great.
Yeah, she's a great writer.
I've been thinking about a lot this thing that my boss Jason Evans said to me, my old boss. He's now on a new job, but and it was something like the role of ministry, and I may have said this here before, but is like tell stories, throw parties, give gifts or something.
That's good.
And yesterday I had our final lunch with my students. We do lunch on Wednesdays, and we actually had our final service on Monday night, until the next semester. And I bought everyone, so everyone gets a Christmas gift, and they all got copies of Every Moment Holy. Do you guys know Every Moment Holy?
Yeah, it's well known.
It's so great. So well known. Okay, thanks.
No, it's not. It's sort of like
I have never heard of it.
modern. It's like modern prayers, like prayers for
it's beautiful.
waiting at the doctor's office.
It's
that
beautiful.
sort of stuff. Yeah.
So they all got a copy of that. They got a little ornament. They got an advent calendar. And I had a couple students show up who literally I've seen once this semester, at the end, and they didn't they just wanted to show up for lunch, right? They didn't know what was happening, and I had thrown in extra gifts just on a whim. And it was it was such a blessing to me to be able to hand them gifts, even though they kind of walk up I'm here. I mean, Dave, this posture of coming back, right? Yeah, we haven't seen, and just to, and they're, I don't pay for these
you have to
gifts.
Be,
my ministry.
You're
pays
Mr.
for them.
Magoo. Oh, you haven't been here for a while. I didn't notice.
Right? Yeah, I know. You're just
What?
hey.
Oh, I saw you just the other day.
Friend, how's it going? But I don't know. There was something for me super I found as a relief, right, that I could just give this to them, and that there was no transactional nature for me behind it. And such a blessing in my ministry, and that they seem really surprised, oh my gosh, so, yeah, I mean, I love this idea. I don't give gifts with an expectation of something. So like I don't know if that's like cultural, like my parents never did either. So I'm never, I don't know. And that's like not to say like I'm like somehow more evolved. It never occurs to me. Like it feels like that thing.
Were you forced to write thank you notes?
Yeah, I totally had to write thank you. I mean, I was a Southern family, you had to write thank you notes, but people, not writing them back. My mother would often say to me, like, it doesn't matter if people write a thank you note to me. Like, I don't think about that or worry about it. So, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I think that I'd still rather receive gifts, even if there's slight strings attached, from most people. Though I have definitely received gifts from people that if I'd known what was entailed and how little of a gift it actually was, I would have run screaming in the other direction. But for the most part, I like the gratuity. I like to give gifts. I enjoy sort of like blowing my kids' minds with gifts that they weren't expecting. I find that to be a truly joyful thing.
Yeah.
And it always gets a little sad when there's so much going on at this time of year that you don't feel like you can put enough effort into it. And that's probably a little bit of a liability for people in ministry work.
Oh,
Yes.
gosh. Of course.
That we're sort of limping to the not sort of. We're definitely limping to the finish line.
Everyone kind of is, though, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a little bit more, but at this time of year, you can just feel the anxiety level, rising, and especially now with the. I don't know, the supply chain crisis.
Oh my gosh.
Will my gift be sitting on a ship, outside
Right.
the Long Beach Harbor?
RJ, what about you?
I'm like Sarah. I don't give gifts with an expectation of there being like a huge response or something. I think the law maybe for me was earlier in our marriage. I think. I don't know, this is probably maybe more me, but Jamie and I also, I think, trying to give gifts that were like really, I don't know, thoughtful, but also like kind of responsible a little bit. Like I think our first Christmas I gave, like we liked to camp back then. I think I gave Jamie like a Leatherman or something, which is like this. I gave her more than just that, but that was one of the things I gave her.
Goodness gracious.
And that, exactly. Thank you. I'm outing myself here. And I can't remember what she gave me, but at some point we just both looked at each other and we're like, yeah, that was okay. That was fun. But what we really want is stuff we actually want that we feel too guilty buying for ourselves.
Yeah.
Jamie's like, all I
That's
want.
the sweet spot.
I just want jewelry and handbags.
Yes.
And I'm like, all I want is like stupid electronics and I don't know, stuff for my car.
Yeah.
That I would feel
all
guilty.
I want are action figures.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so it did become more fun when we just started buying each other and our kids stuff that they just really, really wanted, but just seemed frivolous.
Yeah.
That's when it was. That's when it was actually.
Well, then it's
a
like
gift.
total nonsense, or there's a playfulness. We're back to playfulness again.
Yeah.
I'm putting together as we speak the Mockingbird gift guide, which is one of my favorite things to do every year because it's totally silly, though peppered with some serious things, and I just can't tell you how much fun it's been.
Oh.
Well, any other thoughts on gifts? Because I tell you, the gift I want more than anything is one of those Theraguns. It's expensive.
Yeah.
Those like massage gun things. It's expensive, but that I would never buy it for myself.
But that's a must-have for soapbox.
Interesting.
But that's like
Whoa,
for
gotta have it.
when you
Those
you
muscles have to be massaged.
Well, as Jacob Smith says, the only thing that penetrates more deeply is the Holy Spirit. Sorry, that'll be erased.
Absolutely not.
Jake had said that, and then as it was coming out of my mouth, I was like, wait, what am I saying? Oh my gosh. I was like, ooh, okay. This is a more serious one, and but it also has to do with gift giving and differences in sort of our times versus that of our children, and it's by Esau Macaulay. In the Times, Esau, who's an Anglican priest who wrote the book Reading While Black. He wrote, "I grew up poor. How am I supposed to raise my middle-class kids?" This is what he says. "The difference between my childhood Thanksgivings, for instance," this is written right before Thanksgiving, "and those of my kids is the world that existed around the holiday. My mother was diagnosed with a brain tumor when I was in elementary school. She couldn't work full-time, so we lived mostly on government assistance. Violence, complicated school, parties, and sporting events. As far back as I can remember, I've known how to look into a person's eyes and tell the difference between someone who is willing to fight and someone who is comfortable with much worse. But I now find myself in a difficult, bewildering position. My children do not know how to read a room, observe the set of a jaw, or assess the determination of a glare. They wave at strangers and are apt to start up conversations, assuming that the other person bears them goodwill. They speak about college and futures as lawyers and doctors and teachers. They open the refrigerator and expect to find food. And I sometimes find that I don't know how to be their father. I can tell them stories of growing up without enough to eat and moving from home to home because we couldn't afford to pay our rent. I can speak to them about having classmates killed. I can teach them about living in areas defined by redlining. These sound like the things experienced by a character in a play, though, not a part of a life lived by their father. My children do not understand my world, and I do not understand theirs. I do not know what it's like to be a child waking up in a home with 2 college graduates at the helm. I do not know what it's like to expect birthday parties, Christmas trees, and tons of presents. I do not know what it's like to spend so much time unafraid. Yet I don't want to fall into the trap of treating poverty as some kind of learning experience. And yet, I cannot help believing that my children have lost something, the determination born of suffering. I wish that I could give them that feeling. It formed the background of my pastor's sermons in the black churches of my youth. That suffering was a unifying factor in all my deepest friendships. Still, I can teach my children the most important lesson my mother taught me. Our circumstances do not determine our worth. My kids are not in some ontologically different category than poor kids. If they're ever tempted to look down upon others, I remind them to see the face of their father on the visages of the poor. You almost wonder if you could capitalize father there.
I know. So it's not the New York Times, honey, but yeah.
Well, hey, the fact that he's writing New York Times at all
is amazing.
It's a oddity.
I loved this piece. I sent it to you because I found it to be so powerful for several different reasons. I mean, it struck me. I have friends who grew up in very different economic circumstances than the ones that they're raising children in, and I think we can underestimate the fear and anxiety that comes with that, even if you're, so much better off, right? And also clearly a lot of this is also, an issue of race. And I think that's really powerful to read. But I found something actually really relatable and I hate to use the phrase imposter syndrome, but it is this kind of idea of this world that we're inhabiting that we feel like we don't belong in. And I think it's so common to experiences. And the last thing that I found incredibly powerful about this, that is always a thing that moves me, is that I just feel like we don't know. We assess each other so much physically and we don't know what's happening internally, and I think there's so much grace we have to offer one another. I mean, it's funny. I thought of this piece with the gift piece, Dave, because part of the reason I don't assume that people have to send me thank you notes, and honestly, part of the reason I hope people don't assume I'm going to send thank you notes, especially in this season of my life, is that I don't possess the ability to do it right now, And so I kind of love this idea of Esau is incredibly accomplished, in every way one can be accomplished. And yet he's navigating this world that feels very unfamiliar to him and raising children in the midst of it. So I just thought it was a wonderful, wonderful piece.
But all of us have big differences between the way that we grew up and the way that our families are growing up. And even if we don't have a family, the way that sort of life feels today. And I think that's, it is part of what contributes to the imposter syndrome that I believe imposter syndrome is one of these great redundancies because it's not a syndrome. Everyone has it.
Yeah.
It's a universal trait that everyone thinks that they don't quite belong as much as that other person. There's the great Beatles, I think I've told the story before, but there's the great story about the Beatles when Ringo leaves the band during the making of the White Album. Did you remember this story, guys? And John comes and visits him and says, "Please come back to the band," and Ringo says, "Well, the three of you are so tight, and I just have always felt like I'm on the outside." And John says, "What? I thought it was you three." And then George comes and they have the same conversation. "You three seem so tight, but I'm really on the outside." And George says, "What? I thought it was you three." And Paul, needless to say, the exact same thing. Ringo tells that story, and that's the inner circle of the inner circle.
Right.
The Beatles, and here you have, you can't even everyone's got this imposter syndrome.
Completely.
But when it relates to your own children and you'll feel like you're almost like an outsider in your own family. That's I don't know. I was just at Thanksgiving with my wife's family, and it's wonderful and warm, but it's not exactly this kind of Thanksgiving I grew up with.
Right.
But it's the type my kids are growing
Right.
up with. And so
Right,
anyway,
for sure.
RJ, how did this hit you?
Well, one thing it did make me think of, just on that level, there was a piece in, I think it was This American Life, about kind of 30-something black men thinking back to their childhood and about how much they loved the Dukes of Hazzard, and all they wanted was a toy car of the General Lee. But if you know what the General Lee looks like, it's got a big Confederate flag on the roof, and they just didn't care. They had and they look back and they're like, how can it be that I, as a black child in America, all I wanted was a thing of the General Lee, and they were kind of wrestling through that. It was an interesting piece. It's funny, you were talking about 8-Bit, which I haven't seen. I saw it. It's on HBO Max or something, right? Isn't that right?
Yep.
Yeah. I haven't watched it, but it's funny you were talking about looking for the Nintendo, because I remember when I was in boarding school and I walked into one of my teachers' rooms, because at night, we would hang out sometimes at our various teachers' rooms and watch TV or whatever, like a bunch of us. And one of them had just gotten a Nintendo, like the original NES. And I said, "Oh my God, you got a Nintendo? That's so cool." And he looked at me in front of a bunch of people and said, "Well, why don't you get your parents to get you one? You're rich." And I was, it really hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
And it also kind of shook my self-perception, because I was like, wait, I think I was 11 or 12 years old at the time. I was like, am I rich? Am I rich?
Yeah.
Because when I thought about rich, I thought about the Beverly Hillbillies. I thought about the gigantic mansion in Beverly Hills. I didn't think about the pretty nice suburban house in New
Right.
Canaan, Connecticut.
Right.
But the reality was I was rich, and I sort of didn't know it. And I had to I talked to my parents about it. It was really strange. But at the same time, even though we were, we weren't rich, but we were definitely upper middle class. My dad always made us feel guilty about everything having to do with money. Constantly.
Oh, sorry, I shouldn't laugh. That's the way you said it was quite a setup. Yes, I think that's you felt like you had not enough, even though
because he
by the
constantly
world standards,
he would say things like
Yeah.
that. He would be like, if only we didn't have 4 sons, maybe we could do a little bit more, or something. Really, money doesn't grow on trees, guys. Money doesn't grow on trees.
And your dad your dad was an immigrant.
He was an immigrant,
there's a whole
and his
other
dad. There's a whole other
cultural-
thing, right? Because he's
yeah.
looking at the way we're growing up compared to
Yeah,
how he
of
grew up, and he's
course.
probably thinking that he had to really fight tooth and nail
Of
to get out of where he
course.
was, and with a dad who had a elementary school education. So it'd be fascinating to talk to him about that. But now, we have so much less money than my family did growing up, comparatively speaking. But I try so hard not to put any of that guilt on my kids. I try to just live life joyfully and freely, and not with the sense of sort of guilt or control or scarcity that I even I think I told this story. My youngest son a few years ago went to go spend a week with my dad up in Long Island, and they spent the week together, and they went to a fair, and they did whatever, and he got back. I said, "How was it with Opa?" He said, "Oh, it was great," and he paused a beat. He goes, "Opa complains a lot about how much things cost." And I was like, yes, he does. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's still doing it with, So we had a little bond. But anyway, that's the most I can relate to this, is just thinking back about the messages that I got about who I was and what was possible. And I wonder, it'll be interesting to talk to my kids when they grow up about the messages they received,
Well,
about who we were.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, it makes me, how kids, Esau's children will have their own versions of their own stories about how they interface
Yeah.
with him, about his history and who he is now. And,
Yes.
a teacher at our school pulled me aside and said, Annie has told us several times that if she misbehaves at school, then her dad will get fired from his job and you all will lose your house. And I was like, what?
Heavy.
What was that?
So, like, if Annie, does anything remotely out of line, we will be homeless and without a job. And so it is pretty fascinating, like, the way that they kind of, I love being a parent because we think we can, like, impart or, like, we have these, like, existential crises like regularly about what are they learning and how are they getting it from us. They're having their own existential crisis, like it's just like, I don't know, just funny.
That's they are. And one of the lines here that struck me is this line when he says, "My kids are not in some ontologically different category than poor kids."
Yeah.
Now that cuts both ways, I think,
does.
because a lot of people would say that you would look at if you do grow up with less, you look at rich kids and you say, well, they don't suffer, and that's not true. They
Well,
suffer
that's
in
why I
different
asked
ways.
how old his kids were, because I know what it is to be a parent to want to save your kids from all suffering, but you can't do it.
Yeah.
You just it doesn't matter. You're
Right.
just going through middle school,
They
going
will
through high school,
suffer.
applying
They
for
will just
college.
suffer
Like it may be different. It may be
Yes.
different.
Yeah.
But there's
Yeah,
it's
it's-
unavoidable.
Yeah.
It's unavoidable.
But that's a bedrock. I mean, frankly, it's a bedrock. RJ, you're gonna laugh, but that's a bedrock of low anthropology. Everybody is suffering in some way.
always be closing, Dave. Always be
Give me a
closing, baby.
break. Okay, I'm sorry. It's what's on my mind.
I love it, Dave.
What was I going to
love
say?
it.
Oh, by the way, it's like I had this conversation with someone recently because just growing up in what very affluent areas or affluent adjacent areas, but without ever having much money.
Yeah.
My family, we were talking about like what are the linguistic tells and of that kind of community? And that you're in a rich community if the word rich is completely out of bounds. Like
That's right. Never ever
if
never
you
talk
say
about
the
money
word-
ever.
Never talk about money ever.
gosh.
And if someone says rich, like the whole room goes quiet.
Right.
Like you could talk about wealth, you can talk about affluence, you cannot say rich.
Well, that's
you
what
can't-
happened to me. Like when
you
I
don't
was
say
12 years
drapes,
old.
you say
Yeah. I was
curtains.
like, oh,
you
what?
don't
What?
say couches, you say sofas.
Yeah,
like
oh my
it's a,
gosh. Somebody corrected me a few weeks ago because I said couch, like in our neighborhood. They were
You don't say
"It's
lobby, you
Is
say-
she still alive?
You don't say lobby.
I was like, okay.
Sarah, you don't say lobby, you say narthex.
Oh my god.
Just kidding. I'm just joking.
You don't say cafeteria, you say refectory. Okay?
But this idea, that Esau is going out on a limb to say, because a lot of people would say that we are in ontologically different categories by virtue of our race, by virtue of our socioeconomic class,
Yeah.
or by virtue of our gender, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There are differences in our experience.
Yeah.
There are, structural, systemic things that we're subject to, but no one is exempt. I get that. But it is one of the things I think that's so powerful about what he's saying is actually there's a through line of suffering and a through line of need.
I mean, the only thing I would say to that, Dave, is I think we underestimate, especially as white people, the daily onslaught of just being black in the world and violence that comes with it. Of our people, especially my female friends are like, who's going to say what about my hair? Just when I want to go to the grocery store. I think we underestimate like how often that is like an interface that has to happen and how exhaustive that is, and we're seeing, I mean, it's an interesting thing because we're seeing in research, like it, kind of across every category, medically speaking, there's a lot higher rates of illness and cancer and infant mortality and all these things, and a lot of it's attributed to just daily stress. So to live under that for your whole life and then to raise kids that are not living under that in the same way. I mean, I don't.
Oh, I get that. What I want to say though is that the suffering that he has experienced that has produced this incredible works like what he's saying right now in this article is it's like this paradox of just life in the world, that suffering, no one is exempt from it, and in fact, when if you I'm always thinking the future of Christian witness in America is almost definitely coming from the black community. Like that's
God
and
shows
part of
up
it
in the
has
wilderness.
to do
Yeah.
with the suffering,
Yeah.
and so you don't want to say, okay, therefore it's good that suffering exists, or
Right.
that more people should suffer. But he's sort of kind of saying, well, I'm still grateful that
It's who
made
he
me
is.
who I am.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I think that, in fact, the lack of suffering that you have in a privileged community creates a different type of it creates another kind of like suicidal unhappiness.
Yeah.
That is I'm just trying to say that in order to love people and not put them into ontological categories, the only way I figured out how to do it is to say that God loves people, and also that everyone is subject to all sorts of contingencies and painful experiences that no matter where they're born.
Yeah.
And that applies to someone living in the outskirts of a Chinese village as much as it does, I hope, to idiot Dutch kids outside of New York City,
Hello.
New Canaan, Connecticut.
Hello.
Like
Yeah. I mean,
rich, little, beautiful, blonde-haired, white Dutch children named R.J. Heyman.
I'm like sitting here, like surrounded by our Christmas presents that I've got to like, pack up for people because I love to shop and because consumerism is like one of my favorite things. And I bought these tea towels and I just bought everyone they had and I have no idea who I'm giving them to, but I love them so much because they just say, sometimes blessings are also bullshit.
Sarah, there you go. We've got our title, everybody. Oh, man. Well, let's go to the next thing, which is something, and the last thing, I did not realize this, though I kind of knew. RJ, I bet you knew. America's Gambling Addiction is Metastasizing by Stephen Marsh in The Atlantic.
Oh, no.
Gambling... Gambling has become one of the defining pleasures of our time, the perfect accompaniment to an era of high risk, rigged economies, and a looming sense of collapse. Once there was Las Vegas, now there's a Las Vegas in every phone. You can bet on almost anything today. Elections, literary prizes. If you watch sports regularly, you probably feel, as I do, that the games have become interruptions in a more or less constant barrage of wagering promotion. Gambling is swallowing sports. This has to do with the fact that in 2018, the Supreme Court struck down the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, opening the door to online sports betting across 21 states. As a direct result, sports betting revenues grew 69% from 2019 to 2020, and another 270% in the first quarter of 2021.
What? Okay, sorry.
I'll just
continue.
repeat that. Another 270% during the first quarter
I'm
of
in the wrong
2021.
industry. Continue.
I mean, we knew that before this, okay?
Exactly.
It's also the
You chose
episode where
poorly.
we just ruthlessly rag on RJ. There was for a time a kind of balance, weighing the public good against desires of the market. Then the market won. For one thing, attempts at repression, like the war on alcohol or drugs, often did more harm than good. And regulated markets allowed those substances to be controlled in a much more sensible way through law enforcement. For another, greed has a tendency to win against any other consideration. The end result is the same. You do you. If it kills you, that's on you. He goes on to say, gambling produces corruption the way salt water produces rust. You can fight it for a while, but it wins in the end. Gambling is now firmly ensconced in the sports matrix. The same companies own the right to broadcast the games, the journalism about the games, the betting markets for those games. What could go wrong? Transactions, once considered the purview of the mafia, have been mainstreamed. Now, it gets a little more personal here. Gambling relies on addiction for its business model to function. Everybody knows that. But addiction is also the business model for a huge chunk of Silicon Valley. Gambling ruins lives the way of a soul-crushing debt. Everybody knows that too. But gambling is an entertainment of uncertainty, a way of turning instability into play, of pretending that the structures of life don't apply to you, that you are exempt from statistics. It's also a way of avoiding reality and avoiding the future. Gambling expresses, through entertainment, the basic truth of the moment. Everything, every little thing can be converted into a marketplace with winners and losers, and the house always wins. The only vice left is being broke.
Whoa.
The house always wins.
I went to a casino last year for the first time in a little while. I immediately lost like the $50 I could use. I thought I would be the exception to the rule.
Yeah. I mean, I was actually thinking back to being a child, and I remember when the Mississippi Gaming Act was passed in 1990, and that allowed us to have like riverboat casinos. And so you could have them like up the Mississippi River. So it was like went into the state, and I mean, I remember being a family reunion and everyone's in rural Louisiana, everyone's sitting around, they're talking about it. And one of my elderly relatives said, well, we're welcoming the devil to our shores. And it's not wrong. I mean, back then it was like, this silly thing that an elderly person said, but I don't know. I think, I just think we always want to underestimate the worst vices. And their power over us, and we all want to be the exception to them. And the thing with gambling is like, because it's not a physical substance, right? It's not alcohol, it's not a pill. I think it's really easy to feel like you can outwit it, but I don't know. We really stay away from it. It just feels super. Like almost like in a. Like the same way I'll stay away from tarot cards. Like I'm just like, I'm not fucking with the devil. I just like, I just don't want to get near it, which I know probably sounds a little crazy to people, but Josh and I, the first night we were away from our son, we left him with my parents, and it's the only time we've been to a casino because we could get a really, really, really cheap hotel room at a riverboat casino in Vicksburg, Mississippi. And we walk in at like 3:00 in the afternoon. Dave, we've got like $50, right? And ours lasted a little longer than yours, but we still lost it. And I remember being super excited because we had no money, and this lady came around giving us free drinks. And Josh walked up to me and he's like, you need to be a little less excited because everyone here is so sad and it's noticeable.
Yeah.
And that was like the only, and then I don't know. I just find gambling to be so troubling. And I'm sorry if that sounds judgmental. And gosh, I mean, as many people are into this, I worry that we have listeners who are feeling really judged right now. It just worries me,
Yeah.
I one time I went to a casino from one of my brother's bachelor parties. It was like Foxwoods or something in Connecticut because, gaming became huge in Connecticut in the 1990s or something. And I brought $50 or $60 with me, and I was there for like 8 hours, and I could not bring myself to spend it. I actually was like angry. I was angry at myself. I was like, how tight-fisted are you? Like, how fearful are you? But I couldn't do it. So there's a temptation to self-righteousness. But let's face it, we all have our self-destructive vices.
Sure.
We all have ways that we escape reality, that we, from my biggest one is my phone. And I'm as addicted. It doesn't cost me. Well, I guess it does cost me. What are $300 a month I pay for my family plan. For me and like all my kids and everything. But we all have ways that we're trying to escape reality, and some will bring financial ruin quicker than others. But we all need a little bit of relief from the grind of existence. Right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the thing about...
No, I'm not saying it's okay. I'm not saying it's healthy or good or anything. I'm just saying everyone does it.
The thing that freaks me out is it's so solitary, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're not in a casino. You're not reflecting with other people. You're not seeing people look sad. You're not having any of those experiences. If you're in Mississippi, you're not, like, unable to breathe from the cigarette smoke. Like, it's just you losing money on your phone. So...
It's interesting to me because I do have a friend who... and she does not have a gambling problem from what I can tell, but she and her husband go to Atlantic City or Las Vegas probably 4 to 5 times a year. And they always have fun and they always have a certain amount of money that they come and they spend. And
we stayed in Vegas once. It was great. We didn't gamble, but it was awesome.
What I'm saying is that she does go to gamble and she loves it, and there's a playfulness about it. and I see that. And so I want to acknowledge that that's possible. But I also know that that's not the reality for most people. And I don't think I've ever walked into maybe slightly more depressing scenes, but in the ballpark of the most depressing scenes I've ever walked into is when I was on a road trip in college and we had to stop we wanted to get one of those all-you-can-eat buffets at a casino in Las Vegas, and we walked in and it was 11 a.m. and there's all these basically you got the blue-haired ladies with the smoking cigarettes pulling the
with the
levers
oxygen tank right next to them.
and these men just sort of sitting there. It feels like hell's waiting room, It's just and that's I know these people again. They're not in a different ontological category.
Right.
I've gotten close enough to gambling to know that I could get sucked in like that, and it's easy to. And they're just looking for some comfort and some excitement. They're I can sympathize with it, and yet to walk in there, I kind of couldn't breathe until I got out of there, and it wasn't just because of the smoke.
Right.
But the other thing was I do have children who watch sports all the time, and now that there's all these sports betting venue ads, they're constantly asking me what's going on.
What is DraftKings?
What is DraftKings?
Yes.
Why is
we're getting the
who is
same
it?
questions.
What are we gambling on? It's very
And like all our answers feel like no offense to our Southern Baptist listeners, but like hard shell Southern Baptist, like 1972 grandma answers. Like when I answer them, I'm like, it's a bad, it's just like this like super judgmental thing. And it's funny, like I was sitting here, I do want to say for me, the online gambling is very much scarier. I mean, I guess I've said this, but then the casinos, like I get the draw of the casinos. Also, like when I was a kid, we had a family member win $50,000 at a casino.
woohoo!
Yeah, and like it is like legendary story in our family.
Most exciting thing that's ever happened.
Oh yeah, I mean, so I totally get it. It's just, it's like they're taking this thing that can be fun, can be a vice, and for me, almost making it pure vice. Like when it goes on a phone, it's like there's no Sex in the City slot machine. You know what I mean? There's no like cranky.
Well, it's also interesting. I watched Ocean's 11, the remake, with my son, and he loved that movie. And that movie is fantastic, and so is Ocean's 13. But what's going on is it's a huge heist, but it's morally kind of more exciting, or at least much, because they're stealing from a casino, and it sort of senses like the house that always wins is going to lose,
right.
and we kind of have this underdog, like I want to see the bad guys go down, and the bad guys that's unassailably fine to portray as bad guys, and that's the hard thing today, to find someone who's like it's okay to say they're just bad. A casino owner, Al Pacino or Andy Garcia, they are allowed to just be completely screwed in every way. Right. And I wonder what's going on there. Sam Bush, though, he wrote about this, and this is what got to me about it. Yeah. He says, this is for the Mockingbird site in a post called Risky Business, which we'll link to in show notes. He says, are we really that bored? Is life that mundane? Boredom, at least a state of inactivity, seems to be built into life itself when God put his feet up on the seventh day. It might not be the state we are called to perpetually live in, but it certainly has its time and place. Watching a football game on a Sunday afternoon, for instance. Searching for excitement, we miss out on what's real. Perhaps we aren't meant to live on an IV drip of adrenaline. Perhaps we weren't meant to be drugged out on the latest touchdown pass, but to pause and notice our lives and the care of God amid it all. This God revealed his love in a death that was all but ignored by the nearby Roman soldiers. The soldiers, you see, did not hear his final breath of forgiveness or pause to wonder who this supposed king might really be. They were too busy gambling over his blood-stained clothes.
Whoa.
Okay,
Mic drop.
Okay, Sam.
Sam.
Woo-hoo.
Maybe
see
transfer
you.
from Duke to a more Baptist.
I know. Sam's at Nemo University now, okay?
Now that I resonate with more, and I the addiction to activity, like that's something I've really been thinking a lot about recently, because I think, did I say this last time, that it feels like it's been a couple years of massive overfunctioning and kind of adrenaline addiction, right? Constantly having to rethink ministry, constantly having to pivot, constantly having to make decisions. We also starting a new ministry, moving to a new place. And I'm a little. I mean, this weekend was a good example. Like, Thanksgiving was Thanksgiving was wonderful, and we were with a bunch of people, and it was fun. And then Friday I got up and I played tennis, and then we played golf, and then we went to somebody's house for dinner. And then Saturday I got up and we ended up kind of like laying around and watching football most of the day, and I did not like it. I was not able to chill. Like we finally played Settlers later that night. I was like, okay, finally we're doing something. Yes, now we're doing something. And then on Sunday, I asked Jackson, I was like, because he's also pretty like energetic. I was like, how was yesterday for you? Did you like yesterday? Because I was feeling guilty. Like maybe you should have driven to Miami or something. And he's like, yesterday was great. I was like, we didn't do anything. He was like, yeah, wasn't it awesome? And I was like, okay, maybe it was. I'm feeling, is life intended to be an IV adrenaline drip? And that's felt like my life for the last couple years, and I would like to not live with my hair on fire all the time, but I also don't know how to necessarily get off the hamster wheel. I don't anyone can relate to that. I'm so jealous of you, Sarah. You're like, we just had our last meeting of the semester. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Can you imagine my husband when I say that? He's like,
what? It's like, wait, you're not going to, now you're not going to do anything, but like your kids are gone you're not doing anything for the next 7 weeks. It's like,
it's not that long. It's 4, but it's still really nice. I mean, but for me, yes, that's true. But what that also means is, like, as the spouse of a person who has all the Sunday responsibilities of Christmas, I do all the, the shopping and the cooking and the parties.
Okay, I feel better now. You've justified your existence.
I'm stepping right into that world now.
I know,
so it's
I'm
not
kidding.
like, it's not, but I mean, yeah.
And then I'll say, I send you guys that piece, and I don't want to, that's really struck me actually about Ted Lasso, because I love Ted Lasso and I want to be Ted Lasso. But this whole thing was about how, because Ted Lasso is a Christ figure, and none of us can be that, and none of us can do that. And sometimes when you're so obsessed with helping others, it's just a way to mask over dealing with your own stuff. And in some ways, I felt like the past 2 years has been, a way to mask over dealing with my own stuff.
Yeah.
And it needs to come to an end at some point.
Yeah.
Well, and also for some people, it's been that. I think for people for whom all the wheels ground to a halt, they had to deal with
too much dealing with themselves.
To deal with. I mean, I think that. Well, let me, guys. Don't want to end it on that note, because I know that Sarah, you probably said something to your students yesterday about Advent. RJ, you preached last weekend about Advent. I'm assuming. Can I hear from the two of you what it is you said, or give us some sense of it before we get off this podcast?
I think for me, the message with my students is always that, like, in God's eyes, they are already enough. Because they just inhabit environments where, like, they're never enough. They never work hard enough. They're never present enough. But, I told them the story of, which I only let myself talk about this movie now once a year, because otherwise I'd preach about it all the time, but the battery's not included. In fact, they asked me about the movie yesterday, because it has that beautiful line of, like, the fastest way to end a miracle is to ask it what it wants. And, I think that it's like we're given this gift of God through Jesus Christ, and it's like asking God what God wants from us is the fastest way for it to be over. So yeah, just that we would, like, be able to I don't know, bask in the thought that we are enough in this season of coming light is really important. So yeah.
RJ?
I just said Jesus is coming back. He's coming back. We look back, we give thanks for his first coming, which was kind of this silent whisper, almost this secret, but his second coming will not be. He's going to come on clouds, and I talked about the passage from last week was it's very scary in the beginning, that there'll be upheaval in the nations and the roaring of waves and fear and foreboding, when the end times come. And it says, when you see all these signs, lift up your head because your redemption is near. And the word redemption that Jesus uses there is such a richer word. I don't usually do Greek word studies or whatever, but it means being bought back, being ransomed, it's the word they used when prisoners of war were set free, or when slaves were released. When captives were bought back and ransomed.
Yeah, it's like almost like almost a word that's like you're getting your freedom papers.
So many different
Yeah,
things,
yeah.
and that we have nothing to fear, and in fact everything to look forward to, and that the second coming is something even more to celebrate than the first coming, and that is as complicated and broken as our lives and our relationships and our world is. It's not forever, and Jesus is coming back, and all will be made right. So that's I'm ready for that. After
I feel like you've been attending Maymall University too, and I'm here for it.
Oh,
I can't help but
I got my associates. I'm going for my.
I love it.
I can't help but think of this a little bit in gambling terms, because what you're saying is that the stakes.
We're playing with house money.
The stakes have been lowered, and God, or you say, we did a conference in Texas at one point. We called it the risk of grace. Meaning there is no risk, or at least there's all risk. You are free to risk everything for other people, because the stakes of you are enough because God has declared you enough, not because of your performance or your ability to bet on the right horse, including when that horse is yourself. And there is something, I think, I didn't make this connection as much. I thought Sam's illustration about the soldiers was so brilliant, but when it comes to risk and it comes to God, it's God that takes on the risk. We're a terrible bet. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing, but yet when I approach my life, I'm so afraid of risking feelings. I'm afraid of risking words. I'm afraid of upsetting people. That so much fear involved
going
in risk.
Bankrupt.
Yeah, I mean, money, yeah, sure, but risk, in an ultimate sense, has been kind of. It's not yours. It's not yours to actually. It was never yours. It was.
The house always wins. But the house is God. The house is Jesus. We go to the house and we gamble, but the house always wins, and the house ultimately is on our side. Vegas is not on our side, but God is.
Well, happy Advent to you guys. Merry Christmas. I'll say it. I'm grateful for you, and I hope that it goes well. If we talk, if we don't talk, whatever. But Sarah, I'm especially thinking of you and my prayers on the 9th. And I just would say, to our audience that has been so supportive, and I can't say it on your behalf, but I can say it as a person who's witnessed what this past year has, some of the fruit, and some of the risk incurred by people that don't even know us. Some of to be gracious to has been not just moving or encouraging. It's been life changing.
Yeah. Yeah.
To a witness. I can't even speak for you, but
yeah, it has. It's funny. I was thinking about Christmas, because no one's on here for clergy pro tips, but I do all our Christmas shopping way before Christmas. And Mockingbird did this thing where you guys bought us Christmas presents. Like, different people could buy us different things, and then Jane Grizzle, who is a saint among women, wrapped them all and delivered them like Santa Claus at our house. And I never asked, and it's only recently occurred to me, because it was it was just sort of one jarring experience after another. And whose idea was that, and why did you do it? I was like, did they do it because they assumed that I wouldn't have Christmas done? I didn't know. Dave's shaking his head no. And it was just this insane, because I had shopped for Christmas, and then Jane showed up with literally twice the amount of presents that were already under the tree. It was this insane, beautiful experience of abundance. And and the gifts were so specific. I still have the perfume that Kate bought, your wife. They felt very specific, even though you could have just bought us nonsense. Like your parents got Josh a Grateful Dead book that he loves, like it was stuff like that. And like, I feel like that sort of set the tone for just this sense of like, of feeling known in our grief and feeling loved. And that, I can't believe we've made it through almost a year. So yeah, I can't believe it, but we have. And, my prayer every night continues to be that I hope that they know that we're going to be okay. And a huge part of the reason that we're going to be okay is because of people like you in our lives. So I'm very thankful.
Thanks, Sarah.
Love you, Sarah.
Love you guys too.
Love you. All right. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on the web at www.mbird.com. And we'd always love to hear from you at info@mbird.com. Audio production for the Mockingcast is provided by TJ Hester. And if you like what you've heard, please drop over to iTunes and leave us a rating or review. Until next time.